Hello, this is Mike Mason from Chaosium, and today I'm with Paul Fricker.
Hi there. Yes, I'm Paul Fricker. Happy to be with you.
Hi, Paul. We are going to be talking about making dice rolls. What, when should you make a dice roll?
Well, I think people like the sound of rolling dice, don't they? But you can do it too often, and you can do it for what might be called inappropriate things. So I think it wants to be rolling dice when it feels important. But how do you know when it feels important? I think that's the question, right?
Well, yeah, you can roll. I think in the rule book we try and say, don't make a dice roll for every little thing. So, every time you get in a car or every time you're talking to someone, you're not making a skill roll because that would just bog the game down. So, I guess the case is, the question is, how do you know when something's dramatic? When is, if we say that making a skill roll should be dramatic, is that a good rule of thumb?
I think so. I think as a keeper, and it's generally the keeper that makes this call whether to ask for a roll or not. And your example of a car is a good one. It's one we used in the rule book as well, because every time I get in my car in real life, I kind of am using my drive skill not to crash and, not to cause an accident. But as a player character in a Call of Cthulhu game, do I need to roll my drive skill every time, we drive across town or we drive, to the spooky old house or, we're just doing. So if it's routine, you don't need to roll dice. Even I think if you're landing an aeroplane, if with the pilot skill, I don't think you need to roll every time you land the plane. You'd need to land maybe if it's a strong wind, if you're landing not on an airstrip. Yeah, definitely. If you're landing in a cornfield, then that's a roll. If you're landing on ice in the Antarctic, that's a roll maybe. And if you're just driving your car, I think generally it's not. But if you're being chased, yeah, it's a roll. If somebody's shooting at you, if you're having to turn down a blind alley and there's like boxes and bins and stuff, then it's a roll. If it's trying to negotiate through a crowded market street like we see in James Bond films, something like that, it's going to be a roll. When there's an exciting thing that might happen if you fail. There's always the option if you fail, you're going to crash, which is kind of dramatic. But do you want to crash on the way to the supermarket, just going out to get supplies? Not really.
Well, not really. No, I think it's also probably important to say, if you're going to ask for a role, you should know what that role means. Both, normally you know what it means in terms of success, but actually equally important, what happens if the role is failed? Because if you don't think ahead and think, well, actually, what are the consequences of failure here? You can suddenly find yourself in a difficult position, or in the spur of the moment, you may kind of overthink it and think actually that the plane we've just, we're trying to land on in a farmer's field. I've asked for a pilot role, and I'm kind of assuming they're going to make the role okay, but they don't. And so I say, okay, oh well, you've crashed the plane. Oh, suddenly roll damage, and suddenly you've killed the entire party with what is effectively not an important role in the terms of the actual plot of the scenario. They're just arriving. So how do what do you sort of do in terms of thinking about, consequences for roles?
I think if it's a dramatic situation, then I put it to them that, do you really want to do this thing? Do you really want to speed down this alley? Because this could go wrong. Do you really want to land your plane here? Because it looks pretty risky. It looks pretty bumpy. If you go wrong, you could wreck your plane. You could damage it. You may not be able to take off again. So throw out some of the consequences that they might suffer. So they kind of know that, because if you roll the dice and you fail it, and as a player, you didn't actually realize that you were taking a risk here, then it's like, oh, I kind of feel a bit screwed over here because I thought this was just routine. If I'm rolling a dice to go to the supermarket, I'm not really expecting to crash my car, write it off, and injure everybody in the car. That's a potential thing in real life that could happen, but it doesn't seem appropriate unless the GM says, well, you're going up there, there's lots of traffic, I don't know, there's some crazy stuff going on. Are you really going to push on through up this road where there's loads of I don't know, there's wild animals running across the road or something, and it's kind of foreshadowing the danger of it. Then I feel if I fail the roll, okay, I can kind of accept those bad consequences because it was clear I was taking a risk.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think also I guess what I'm trying to get at is when you're thinking about the consequences of failure, don't necessarily jump to the worst possible consequence. So if you crash a plane, it doesn't mean the plane ends up in a fireball and everyone is injured, severely injured. It may just be a really rough landing, and maybe it's just a point of damage. So you're not impacting the characters and the plot severely, but you are giving them a shake. And maybe the fact that they've landed the plane in a bad way has caused some damage. That there's a consequence to the plane. There's a consequence to the farmer who comes out and says, "What have you done to my field?" Maybe it sends up smoke and flames that the monster or the cultists who are hiding in the mountains see, and so are somewhat prepared. So that's more of a lower key kind of consequence, but equally just as meaningful and probably even more impactful in terms of the plot or the scenario as it unfolds.
I think there's another potential consequence of failing a roll that sometimes isn't considered in these situations is that, yeah, you don't succeed, but it means that your attempt fails. So in the case of landing the plane, it's not that you crash the plane and can't take off again. Maybe it's that you come down and you describe to the player you're coming down and the wheels touch and it bumps and you realize you are going to crash and you're forced to pull up. So you're still in the air. You failed the piloting roll to land. You haven't actually landed. And now you're circling around looking for somewhere else to land. Now we're offering a pushed roll. Now we're saying, okay, well, if you really want to land, you've tried it, you've found it's going to be really risky. You failed it once. Are you sure you want to try and land here, or do you want to fly off somewhere else?
Yeah, you've got a bit, you've got a bit of fuel. You think you can make it maybe to an airstrip or something, but that's a risk. But you want to take it as well, and develop the story, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, and the whole point of the rolls, the whole point, I think, of dice rolls is you said, should we just roll when it's dramatic? I think one of the points of the mechanics, the rules, is to make the game more dramatic. So it's, through those failed rolls, it allows the keeper to kind of push the drama, to push the horror onto the players, to make them make those tough decisions and sort of feel nervous and anxious about, are they going to take this risk?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it's always, I think we've kind of said this, but it's worth repeating is, the kind of classic Call of Cthulhu skills like library use, spot hidden, and things like that. Time and again, we see sort of people using those skills in areas or rooms where actually there's no real successful outcome in terms of there's nothing to find. There's a room, and in terms of the scenario, there are no clues in this room, but the players are wanting to make spot hidden rolls. Now that's a massive waste of time. What would you do in that situation?
So I think if they go into a room and the player calls for a spot hidden, either I would say, yeah, okay, you have a look around. There's really nothing here. You don't need to roll. There's nothing to find. That's kind of an easy get out. And the player, I think, is going to buy that. Or I might sometimes say to the player, well, kind of what's going on, what you've found so far. Is there anything you think you might find here? And if they say, well, we'd look through the drawers looking for diaries or journals or old pictures or maybe a newspaper, that might trigger my brain to sort of think, oh, actually, yeah, they could have been like doodling phone numbers on the edge of the newspaper while they were on the telephone, the bad guys. And suddenly I've got a clue that I can put in that's going to come from them. And if they make their spot hidden, then I might give it to them. So it's a way of kind of, improvising a bit of additional story that kind of makes sense. And they don't know that it wasn't there all along.
No, sure. I mean, in that sense, you're kind of rewarding the players for, getting invested in that scene or that location or the scenario itself. And there's no need to, you don't necessarily have to create a a new clue from scratch, you can just think about, well, actually, I know that in the house there is this journal handout. Now, I don't want to move the journal into this room for the sake of it, but actually, what I could do is I could maybe there's a bit of notepaper that mentions about must remember to must remember to put details of appointment in journal. So it just flags as a journal to find, maybe not in this room, but it helps to kind of guide the players somewhat to what is a real clue, that they'll find in due course, perhaps.
But I think you raised a good point about when the players call for a role, particularly with skills that don't necessarily present themselves as risky or dangerous or dramatic. So library use by default doesn't feel like a particularly dramatic or risky role to make. Can you think of ways that we might present that? They're at the library, they've failed their library use role. Is it just okay, you don't find anything? I mean, sometimes I guess it is.
Well, I think I think you can think wider than what the skill is in terms of what the consequences in play are. So with library use, for instance, obviously the kind of default is you're looking to find some information, whether that's in a book or on the computer or whatever it may be, some sort of written text or whatever. If you make the roll, then you may find that. If you fail the roll, then the binary default is that there is nothing to find for you today. However, you can think more broadly. You can sort of say, okay, you failed the roll, and the consequences of failure are actually wider. Maybe a librarian has come along and is telling you that you need to move out of this section. It's closed, or they cause a problem for you in some way, or you're being too loud, or you're disturbing the books, or you're not putting them back on the shelf in the right order. And so you have an interaction with the librarian or a member of the public or something like that. So it's not necessarily just about the book. You can kind of develop consequences that are broader. It may be that a cultist is in the library and has noticed you searching in that section, so they cause some sort of cause a minor distraction of some kind. They don't go off shooting somebody in the library, but they make a noise or they cause some books to fall over. So there's a something happens that prevents you finding the clue. It's not just purely this kind of binary, you look on the shelf, you don't find it kind of role. You can think of broader reasons or interesting kind of plot developments that the role can suggest to you. I guess that's where
Yeah, I think so. And you can offer those things as a pushed role as well. Like you said, the librarian comes over and is rubbing his chin and saying, "Oh, so you're interested in the old Barlow place, are you?" And it's like, well, do you trust this guy? Are you going to push him for more information? Maybe use his skills in the library use role and push it. Well, if you fail it, then on the fly, I would kind of decide, oh, okay, I guess the librarian is, he's actually a good friend of Mr. Barlow, and he tells him that, people were inquiring about your place today.
Or if that complicates your plot too much, the librarian, who's really enthusiastic and keen, kind of gets it wrong in terms of what you're looking for, and they direct you to another book or another part of the library, so you waste this time and you find some interesting stuff, but it's got really nothing to do, and maybe it's a red herring or actually gives you misleading information about the Barlow house. Maybe something that's completely like an old floor plan that's now completely out of date because they've remodeled the house. So you go in thinking, oh, we know exactly where these rooms are, we're going to go in and break in or whatever, and actually you go and use that and find that actually it's completely wrong, and actually you kind of trap yourself or cause an issue because your expectations have been misaligned because an enthusiastic librarian has given you the wrong information that you thought was correct. That you could go that way as well.
But I am wary of putting too much pressure on the keeper to always be coming up with like amazing ideas. So I think sometimes you can just take it that they failed the roll and not that much happens. But with the pushed roll thing, you've always got the option of, saying, well, you failed, but is there anything that you think you can do to achieve your original goal? To actually find out this information, to actually manage to get up to that upper floor window, whatever it was that you failed the first time. And when you put it to them, what could you do? Often that inspires ideas in my head as to potential consequences. Because I think that's the problem. If you're a really creative keeper and you can come up with these ideas, then great. But the difficulty is, when you get stuck, and I think we all get stuck sometimes.
Oh yeah, and the consequences don't have to be great and tremendous and massively impactful. They can be quite minor, but but they are an annoyance or they are an inconvenience or whatever it may be. And again, it doesn't always have to be an immediate consequence. It could be something, you've just basically, as a keeper, been given license to do something bad, which doesn't necessarily have to be at that immediate time. It can be down the road. So don't feel you have to kind of come up with some brilliance straight away. But as you say, asking the players, what do you think's happened? You suddenly get a load of ideas because they love making things worse for themselves a lot of the time. So
they do. They come up with some great ideas. So it's always good to sort of throw it out to people. What might go wrong here? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit about skill rolls, and we'll see you guys again. Thanks for watching.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.